Is your business, company, or nonprofit struggling to fly? Discover a breathtakingly simple approach to lead any team to greater heights. Is your organization having trouble working as a cohesive team? Are you struggling to lead your employees with so many pieces moving at once? These are all common problems which leaders face on a daily basis. To break the mold, leaders need to learn how to push their teams to greater heights by using the occasional updraft to help them along the way. Today, my guest, Jackie, and I discuss topics such as how to create an updraft within your organization, why integrity is so important as a leader, how leaders can use culture to updraft their organization, powerful ways to foster your team's commitment, and game-changing passion. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, episode 126, Updraft, the Aerodynamics of Great Leadership with Jackie Freedman.
Welcome to this episode of Moving Forward Leadership. Stick around and learn how to achieve, excel, and become a leader that people willingly follow. Lead, don't boss. And now, here's the host of our show, Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy.
Welcome one, welcome all. It is your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy, and it is so great to have you here at the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, where we focus on the three domains of leadership. That is leading yourself so that you can be the best leader that you want to be, so that you can achieve the goals that you're dying to achieve. Leading your team so that you can go and bond and gel and form that high-performing team that everybody wants to have. And finally, lead your organization. Why? So that you can simply increase the output of your organization, whatever that is. And it is so great to have you here. Today, a great guest, Jackie Freedman and I. So, what about Jackie? She founded Delta V Strategies 10 years ago. And she wanted to help leaders grow and learn and listen so their organizations and teams can make it go and flourish. Her passion comes from having worked and interacted with people at all levels. She's seen firsthand how management attitudes and behaviors affect people's performance. She has worked directly with Peter Hunter, the creator of Breaking the Mould process, and she was one of the first U.S. consultants certified with this process. She's got a whole hockey sock full of certifications, and if that's not a Canadian slangism for you, which I'm going to leave in anyway, then I don't know what is. And on top of that, she is a member of the Odyssey International Consulting Consortium and has a slew of professional designations. Outstanding guest, super passionate, super informed, and really, you know what? She has just that you know what I mean? That thing, that spark, the knowledge plus the drive to help people do better. And that's why I brought her here at Moving Forward Leadership for you. And that's what we do here at Moving Forward Leadership, right? We take my 20 years of military experience, we combine that with world-class guests like Jackie Freedman here, amongst many others, and we bring it to you, the listener. So you know what? I'm going to basically shut up now and let you get to the good part, the goods, and that is my interview with Jackie Freedman. So why don't you sit back, relax, and listen to Jackie and I discuss Updraft, the aerodynamics of great leadership. Jackie, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It's so good to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here with you, Scott.
So we're just talking on the preamble, and one of the things I'm intrigued to know is about your book, Updraft. So a guy who has a Canadian Army background but has worked a lot with the Air Force, airplanes still fascinate me, even though I'm a green guy. But I'm more interested in Updraft and the aerodynamics of great leadership. So where does that name come from? Because that's something, of all the people I'm probably interviewed, I'd say 60 to 70 people now. I've lost count. This is probably one of the more intriguing names of the author's book.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that. But yeah, so Updraft, and yes, if you know aerodynamics and some of the concepts around aerodynamics, Updraft specifically comes from the vortex of air that comes off the wingtips of birds, especially larger birds, like geese and swans, stuff like that. When they fly, they create this vortex of air. And if the guy behind them, if the goose or the swan behind them is in the right position, then they will take advantage of the updraft. And that updraft is what they're using when they're all in a V formation. So it doesn't happen when they're just flying around, but when you see geese or swans, pelicans, actually, they fly in a V formation. They do that specifically to take advantage of the updraft that comes off their wingtips. So it's a rising vortex, and it lifts if you're in the right place. And it makes it easier so that they can fly a lot further and a lot faster than they could if they were just either just if they were not in the V formation or flying singly.
There's a lot of science in there, but I actually love the metaphor, because if you think about it, right, that's the role of the leader. It's to lift up their people, to get the whole organization further, faster. So if you think about that, the first goose or bird in front of the V, I'm going to go with Canadian goose because I'm Canadian. So the first Canadian goose in front of the V going south or north, depending on what time of year, right, is actually helping to lift up others. But in the reality is, it's helping to lift the two behind them. But in reality is, it's also actually helping to lift the entire whole V or the whole organization to get home or to get somewhere warmer. So.
And that's exactly that is, and it is the Canada goose that actually inspired that, because while I'm not in Canada, I'm actually along one of the flyways for the Canada geese. And so as I was watching them flying in the V formation, it sort of intrigued me at some point. And when I started doing some research on it, that was exactly what I found. And I thought it made a great metaphor to leadership. And so my whole thing is really, then the book it talks about is how do you as a leader, how do you create updraft? And there's of course a whole bunch of ways to create updraft yourself as a leader. And then how do you make sure that everybody else is creating it so that you can go further and faster as an organization?
So let's talk about it. So what are some of those ways that leaders create updraft within their organization from your standpoint?
Well, I mean, just like, you said, they're right at the front. So their immediate impact is on those people that are right behind them. But of course, the most direct way from that perspective is really who they are. It's who they are, who they're being. Are they someone acting with integrity? Is it palpable to the people around them, and that message getting further through the organization, through the flock, right? That they are making decisions, that they are thinking for the betterment of the organization. And all that comes down into kind of trust and integrity and all that kind of stuff. So for me, the first part of how they create updraft is who they are being, how they are being, what they're bringing of themselves to the organization. Because let's face it, great leaders do inspire a lot of loyalty and trust. And it's not because of where they're going or how, it's because of who they are. So for me, that kind of that's where it starts.
Yeah, the integrity piece is definitely crucial, right? Because that's basically the cornerstone of your credibility. And if you lose your credibility, no one's going to follow you. No one's going to listen to you. They're not going to believe anything you say, not going to believe anything that you do. So I can definitely see how that's crucial for sure. So what?
Right. And when you bring,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, when you bring that back to that V formation, if I'm following you, part of the whole thing is that some people can kind of see where we're going, but most people are trusting the guy or the gal up front. So if I can't trust your integrity, if I can't trust your motives, I'm going to be really tentative about just moving forward, right? I'm not going to be comfortable. So like you said, it's all about that trust. It's all about that integrity, because the people behind there have to be able to trust you because they don't know the big picture. They know their part of the picture.
Well, and it goes holistically, right? From that trust aspect, as well as trust that the leader knows which direction to take the organization in the first place, and believing that that's a good way to go. You can look
Yes.
at it from two ends of the spectrum, right? You can look at it from thriving organizations, pick one of the 50 million that are out there, or the ones that, Uber, for example, that was running itself, mind the pun, into the ground due to the leadership failures from the top.
Right. And that is, you see so much of that. And, the larger the company is, I think the longer that demise takes, because they sort of have resources. Of course, right now that's impacting people's ability, right? Because when times are good, you can get away with a lot of stuff. Right. When times become more difficult, that's where that stuff sometimes really catches up very fast. But yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff, it can go on, but it's going to catch up with you. And yeah, a lot of times when we see that, we're seeing failures at the top that eventually it's going to implode.
Awesome. Love it. So what's the next one? What's the next aspect of Updraft that leaders need to be, in line with?
I believe that the next section of that, and I know you've talked a lot about engagement and getting people involved. The next part of it has to do with what I see, what you bring. So the first thing you bring is yourself. The next thing you're bringing is really a lot of your perceptions, your attitudes, your beliefs, because those things are going to dramatically impact what that culture looks like. Right? If you come in and you don't trust people, that culture is going to reflect ultimately a not trusting employees, not trusting people. And as that leader, you really don't know what the culture looks like, because you're sort of above it, you're creating it. And if you're not being really careful, you don't know what it looks like, which is, it's always ironic because you don't experience it the way people within the company experience it. So you have to be so self-aware and so intentional about what you're bringing, about what your beliefs are, about what those attitudes are. Because no matter how much you think you're not expressing it, you are. It's like a baseball pitcher telegraphing what pitch is coming. He doesn't know he's doing it, but the hitter sure as heck is picking up on it. It's the same thing here. You can't do that because your body language is going to show it. Some of your language is going to show it. The way your actions are going to show it, even if your words are not saying that. So from that perspective, you're bringing all that stuff, and that stuff can create updraft because it can raise and motivate people, or it can do just the opposite, where it's really, demotivating people, it's not empowering them. And that's where, a lot of the connection for me to engagement comes in. Because if I create that positive, awesome culture, then I can trust my people. I can trust that they know what our limits are. They know what's positive. They know what our values are, so that they can go ahead and they're free to be empowered. They're free to act. They're free to do what they have to do a great job. But do you know where our limits are? So they can trust themselves and I can trust them.
Culture is so important, and we spend a lot of time talking about culture here at Moving Forward Leadership. And no matter how much time I spend talking about culture and organizational culture here, I'm like, it's never enough. For all those reasons that you mentioned, right? It's so absolutely crucial. And to tie back to the first point about integrity, they're linked. So you as the leader, if you don't walk the walk and talk the talk, both of it, then you're going to lose that integrity. People are going to stop believing what you say because they're like, well, he doesn't believe that. Look at his body language or her body language. Obviously, they're saying one thing, but they believe something completely different. And if you have that organizational culture where people start questioning your beliefs, what you truly believe for the organization, for in its future, for the employees, the members of it, it's going to have that, basically downdraft
right
effect. But if you walk in, just like you said, and you say, and you inspire and you motivate and you communicate to them at a way that they need to be communicated to and lift them up, then you get that updraft. So no, it's so important. Now,
and I agree. You can't talk about culture enough, and going back to that, from the leadership perspective, I think one of the big issues with that is the leader really doesn't experience the culture. They really don't. And so that's how I think they get so lost thinking that it's one thing when it's really something else.
So how can they go about to experience it now? What are some of the best ways for leaders to experience that culture? Because as you're saying, they don't experience the culture, and that might be confusing to some listeners out there. Like, I'm the leader of the organization, or I'm the leader of the team. What do you mean that I don't experience the culture? I'm part of the organization as well.
Right. But you're actually shaping that culture. That culture is coming from you, and you're not an employee. I mean, even if you are an employee, but you're the head guy, or gal. So things look differently from where you are. Your choices are different. The way you see things are different. You have different options than the people that actually work with you and in that company. So you really, it's funny, you really don't experience the culture the same way that they do, which really most leaders, I think, they don't really have. It's a difficult thing. It definitely is. But it goes back to what you were saying too, is that if you have that integrity and you have the trust, then you're going to be having the right kinds of conversations, because people will be willing to come to you. They're willing to talk to you. If you're looking for feedback, in a really good way, not, so tell me how I'm doing, that's a big question, but how was that meeting? Did people tell me, can you give me feedback on how I ran that meeting? Did people feel free to talk? Did people this? Did people that? And it's funny too. I have to tell you, Scott, because, I'll meet with leaders, and then, I'll meet with some of their team. And what's always amazing to me is that some of the biggest things that a leader will tell me is wrong with his team or his company are things that they will actually identify as something that he does or she does. And it's amazing. It's happened so much now that it is almost funny. I'll have somebody say, people, one of the biggies you always hear about, my people are not accountable. Why aren't they accountable? We're not getting things done. And then you talk to the people in the company and they'll tell you, well, they don't get back to you with decisions. He'll tell you, or she'll tell you, that they're going to talk to you on Friday about it. You never hear about it. If you ask them for something, they'll tell you they're going to get it to you, and then they don't. They're late for meetings. You'll hear this whole litany, and it's the same things that leader is being frustrated by and not realizing that they're creating that same culture. That much of that is coming from them. And it's actually as annoying to the people that work for them as it is to the leader. But again, they don't see it that way. So it's really being so able to be self-aware and taking a hard look at things. But of course, self-awareness is such a funny, it's such a difficult, funny thing. The people that tell me they're the most self-aware are usually the ones that are the furthest from the truth. So having those people, having those trusted people that you can talk to and have a leadership team around you that you've helped to develop, that you inspire and motivate, that you're all energized, that you're working together, then you're going to get good feedback. Then you can ask questions that you get good answers to.
There's so many good things in there. It's all, it's literally, well, not literally, but it's all gold. Couple of interesting things, right? And the way you put it there, it's basically leaders need to check their ego, right? They need to check their ego at the door. And often I get challenged with that, because I need to be a leader. I need to act confident. I need to make people think I have all the answers, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, there's a bunch of things wrong with those statements. One, yes, you do need to be confident, but two, you need to have the questions, not the answers, because the answers are within your organization, not necessarily within your head.
And that goes, I think that's perfect. That goes back to, I know what you say about, lead, don't boss.
Right.
Having all the answers and telling me everything is bossing.
Exactly.
And that's not to say that leaders never do that, but there are places, there's a time and a place, but it's developing the people behind you, developing them so that they can take on more and more and just blow you away with what they can do. It's not saying just do X.
Right. No, I totally agree with you. It's using the power of the team to collaborate to find the best solution to the question or problem at hand, and then you as the leader making the decision. Now, I found it funny. I was kind of chuckling there as you were talking about the culture of, well, they don't get back to us, they don't make decisions, et cetera, et cetera. And to me, that smells problematic in multiple ways. When there's communication issues,
right?
There's another problem of decision making, and then there's also the problem of delegation. It's like, well, do they have to? Are they the ones that have to make the issue? The answers. Make the decisions on everything, or is it too much being held at the higher level that they end up getting completely overrun with all the decisions, most of them being monotonous, mundane day-to-day decisions that really, do the leader of the organization need to make those mundane day-to-day decisions? I'd argue no. I often coach no. I preach no. So we know where I'm going. But I definitely want to hear from you is, how does this have such an impact on the organization?
I mean, generally speaking, I totally agree. I mean, again, if you're making all the decisions, then nobody else is growing, nobody else is leading. We're not engaged, we're not empowered, we're just executing. Now, there are places where that shifts somewhat as an organization grows, right? There are things that change, and the leadership style actually has to adjust and change as the company gets bigger. You can't. The person who has just founded a company and has their 2 first employees, they're going to have to do a lot more of those decision making and, here's how we do it in order to get people up to speed, in order to understand how that works, right? But as that grows, part of the issue, and you're so right about it, part of that issue is that's not sustainable anyway.
No,
right? I mean, that's not even sustainable. So you're right. They become overwhelmed because now they've got however many, they had 5 employees. It kind of still worked, let's say. It's not necessarily the greatest for engagement and all that kind of stuff, but it kind of still works. Once you're up to, let's say, you get 15 people. Now you got 20 people, you got 25 people. Now, as that number goes up, it totally does not work. It's not sustainable. You've got people who should be able to make those, we'll call them, so we won't say mundane, how about day to day? But those, everyday kinds of routine decisions, people should have the experience and the authority to make those. And if they don't, then like you said again, then that leader is just completely overwhelmed. And they're not dealing with the things they should be dealing with. They're not looking at strategic issues. They're not looking at opportunities. They're not looking at, okay, oh my gosh, what do we need to potentially prepare for next? What opportunities are coming up? Because they're too busy making those day-to-day decisions that they shouldn't be involved in at all.
Sometimes you have goals, but you know what? You have a hard time reaching them. And you just can't figure out why. Why is it that you can't achieve those things that you want to achieve? Maybe it's dedication. Maybe it's motivation. Maybe you haven't picked the right goals. So this is where I was not too long ago. And then I realized something. I've been developing the Power Goals program my entire life. And here it is now for you, where you can learn how to pick the right goals, figure out how to achieve those goals, how to stay on track, but most importantly, how to get back on track when you get off. So are you ready? Are ready to up your game and achieve those things that you've been meaning to achieve for so long now? Simply go to movingforwardleadership.com/power and learn more about the Power Goals program and achieve everything that you've been wanting to achieve. And now, back to the show.
Day-to-day decisions that they shouldn't be involved in at all.
No, I agree with you, and I guess I should have contexted my comments with the mundane comments. With I'm also known as a firefighter where I work, so I generally get thrown into, oh, we don't have enough time, the place is a mess, when we need you to sort things out. That's usually where I end up working.
Mm.
So making those day-to-day decisions aren't usually my not necessarily area expertise, but usually area of operations, I guess.
Right. But you're right. They are. I mean, especially from the leadership standpoint, though, they are mundane decisions. They are. And they should not be dealing with them. And if you have people below you that can't deal with them, then whose fault is that?
Oh,
right?
You're preaching now.
Then you're either hiring the wrong people or you're not developing the ones you've got.
That's right, 100%. I say that's a failure 101 on whoever's leading the organization, because their role is to develop future leaders, develop people so that they have the skills to do those tasks, do those jobs that are expected, right?
Right.
And then enables to take things off your plate so that you as the leader can then look at the strategic views of your organization and looking at ways to lift it up and push it forward. So with that, we're talking a lot about the people. We're talking about a lot of the organization. How do we go about getting people completely ingrained into it, into the commitment of the organization, and basically lifting them to the point where not only are they just members of the organization, but they're like super fans of the organization. They got so much passion in them. They just love it. They'd rather turn down a triple pay increase than leave.
Right. And there are people, I mean, you look at all the, and I'm sure you've got that in there. I mean, you look at all the research, pay is not the number one thing.
Not even close.
Never. Right. Exactly. It never, and yet leaders always go there. They almost always go there, and they'll go to, well, we can't pay them anymore. And yet it's not even close to the top. And yet that's where they always think they have to go. I think there's a number of ways that you can do that. I am a fan of companies who have mission, vision, values. So I'm definitely a fan of those. However, I know people always get tied up on how to define those, but I'll say, very quickly, I mean, mission is your purpose. It's the larger reason you're in business. And I've done this with a lot of companies, and even companies that we'll say they don't have sexy purposes, can still have a great purpose, because your product or your service is solving a problem for somebody. If it weren't, you wouldn't be selling any. So, there's always an aspect that you can have a greater impact, that your product or service is having. It's fulfilling a greater need than just whatever it is. So I think there's that aspect, and people get proud of that. People become proud of that. And that's also really big with some of our younger generations who want to make a difference in this world. So if we can tie whatever our company does to a greater purpose, as I said, even it doesn't have to be a sexy purpose, just a purpose that can really resonate with especially with the younger generations in the workforce. But I think personally, it generates it resonates with everybody. Everybody wants to make a difference. There's just, I'll say, certain generations are used to not having that option. You just went to work and that was the end of it. But would they like to have something that inspires them and makes them feel like they've made a difference every day? Of course they would. Of course they would. So, so there's that aspect. We've talked a little bit about kind of the values, which I think is helpful because, again, that allows people to be kind of proud. We know what we stand for as a company, and that gives them limits, and it allows people to be empowered. It really lets people be empowered and go off and do what they have to do within that. And then for me, and again, these are just the way I define them, but then the vision is sort of a big goal that the company's currently working on, right? And that can also help to kind of, that's also inspiring, because then between that vision of what we're working on today, and however that helps us with our mission, right, our bigger purpose, that's like, so I go into work today I have done something that is for that greater good. I didn't just move paperwork around. I helped to, it's remember that old story about the three guys that were building the cathedral, right? One guy they said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I'm putting bricks down." And he was kind of like, "Yeah, I'm putting bricks down." And then they talked to the next guy, and I'm paraphrasing this, so people who know the story better will know that I'm paraphrasing. But then they talked to the next guy, and he said, "Yeah, I stick the mortar down." And I stick the mortar down. "What do you do?" He says, "Yeah, I'm sticking the mortar down." And then they get to the third guy, who's so excited and he's so happy when he's sitting there and he's happily doing his little thing with his trowel and with the mortar. And they said, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Me?" He says, "I'm building a cathedral." It's that bigger purpose that you can translate to when no matter how small your job is, it's contributing to that bigger goal.
Yeah, it's much like the janitor story and putting the man on the moon. I like that connection though, right? With the mission and vision to the bigger purpose. And if you'll entertain me for a second, or humor me for a second, I'll throw a story at myself. And
please.
I was commander of a logistics squadron of 200 soldiers, and we were broken into 3 different sub-organizations. One was transport, another one was supply, and the final one was maintenance. And so our basic mission was to sustain the units, all the units on the base. So, obviously I would walk around and push that hard whenever we had meetings and whatnot. Before Christmas, one of the things I always liked to do was get a hold of the yearly stats of our key performance, and our KPIs.
Right.
Bit different than the business world, but still, we still have KPIs. And I got everybody together, and I started pushing them out. I start saying what transport did, how many kilometers they did, how many runs they did, yada yada yada. And probably the most interesting one was my contracting cell. So we do a lot of contracts, a lot of local purchases and stuff like this. And it was worth millions of dollars. And once you put that into context of how many families, the average family income, and how many families that equates to the local population, I had people coming up to me like, "I've never looked at it that way before." That, what I would refer to as mundane decision-making paperwork that they would do on a day-to-day basis. Now they had a new way of looking at it when they would go through the 18 inches thick file that is required to do a purchase of a pencil. But now they knew what it meant in the end.
Yeah, that's a great story, Scott. That's a wonderful story. Exactly. It gives bigger meaning even to, like you said, the janitor, right? All those things it's a bigger purpose. And I think people love that bigger purpose, and that provides a lot of updraft. It really lifts people because it does. It's inspiring. It's motivating. Rather than I'm pushing paper, I'm. It's that next sentence is so much more interesting than to get out of bed for that than it is to get out of bed for, well, I've got a lot of paperwork to do today. But when you see how that's contributing or the difference that makes in the greater, that becomes, a much more compelling reason to get up and get out of bed.
And there's a lot of emotion tied up to this, right? There's a lot of emotional connection in there. There's a lot of emotion connection between the individuals, the leader, the organization, the work that's being done. So do you have some other advice for the leader listening? Because, they're hungry. They're frothy at the mouth. They want to lead their teams. They want to lead their organizations. They want to lead themselves better. They want to be the better leader. So do you have some more advice to them how to make those emotion connections between themselves, their team, their organization, so that they can drive success, drive the engagement within their teams to go for those goals?
I think a lot of it, like you're saying, it's connecting to people, no matter how much, sometimes we lose sight of that. But having the leader who's walking around, who knows what's going on, not to the minutia, because we've talked about that. We don't need that minutia. The minutia goes to somebody else, but really is around and is aware. makes such an unbelievable difference for people. I mean, they're brought in by that mission, but that leader needs to connect, right? Part of our connection is potentially if we have the mission, if we have a purpose, whatever you call it, part of that, yes, comes from that. But the other part of it is also the person that we're doing it for, the person that integrity, that trust, that loyalty. And all of that stuff triggers people because it's a one-on-one, it's a person, it's a person. It's somebody that you've stopped by and said, how are you doing? Do you know all those people? Do you interact with those people? Leaders really underestimate the power of their own presence. The power of their presence it's so unbelievably powerful to the person's doing the paperwork or whatever that job is, to have that person come by and just say hello. And of course, I laugh because I've taken leaders through that. You walk through the warehouse the first time and everybody's actually kind of hiding because they're so not used to seeing that person there. The leader doesn't come through. We don't see her back here. We don't see him back here. What are they doing? What do we do wrong? What's coming? So what's funny is that people will actually kind of hide, or you'll see them behind things, or they look really busy because they don't know what that is. And that's a sign that you haven't been there enough, that your presence has not been there to show them that you appreciate what they're doing. And, like you said, there's that difference. There's that level between leading and managing. And depending on the size of that organization, you may have a lot of managers whose job it is to make sure things are being executed. And they're still they're still responsible. Their main job is still to develop and to inspire and help and do that more direct support of people. But when that leader comes through, that's a big deal. And I think leaders really underestimate, like I said, the power of their own presence, how much that makes a difference, because it says to me, that I do that paperwork and you appreciate that. And that for me is just so huge.
Yeah. The audience obviously can't see us, but at one point there I had my hands in my head and I was kind of shaking, kind of laughing at the same time, because it's sad, but it's true. There are so many people that just don't show up physically to their people. They don't get out. And it's interesting. One of the first things that got ingrained into me as a young Army officer was get out with your troops. Get out, get out and do whatever they do. Get out, turn wrenches, drive trucks, do paperwork, whatever your troops do, get out and do it with them. No, obviously not all the time because you have your own work to do, but just have an understanding. Right. When they show up with a problem, you have an understanding of what the heck they're talking about now. Right. And there's so many leaders that don't grasp that. And I absolutely love the show Undercover Boss. I think it's fantastic and amazing. But at the same time, I shake my head and go, well, this is what gives people like you and I jobs, because this shouldn't have to exist. It shouldn't take a TV show for a CEO to go visit one of their sites and listen to their people and go, we have a problem.
Oh my God.
I have a solution, but no one's freaking listened to me.
I'm laughing at that because that show is it's actually become a pet peeve for me, because as you said, we shouldn't need a television show for a CEO to go into their company and ultimately discover that the people working for them are human beings who have their own issues and their own problems that the CEO has never even thought about. And I always think that what kind of gets me is, so these three people will get, whatever, they come up at the end and they help them with those personal problems in some way. And I always leave it thinking, okay, but what about the other 300 people in that company? What about the other 3,000 people in that company? Are you seeing that from the bigger picture? And that's why I just have to laugh when you say that, because we should not need that. You should be walking around in there. It doesn't mean you're going to know everybody's personal problems. We're not suggesting that. But the fact that they're connecting with people as human beings is sort of funny, because, hey, guess what? They're human beings. there are people that's who work for you, and they all have lots of trials and tribulations and problems and issues and celebrations and all these other things. So it's really funny that you brought that up, because that is exactly, it's so, it's just so illustrative of that issue. Even, why, as a franchise, why don't you drop in on franchises to check them out? Why aren't you walking through your warehouse anyway? Why do you need a camera crew in order to go through your warehouse?
Yeah, I think we could go on for hours about that.
Absolutely.
But the moral of the story is, from what I'm hearing is that, your people are humans, just like you are. Treat them like a human being. Listen to them. Listen to their problems. Listen to their solutions. Listen to their ideas. Listen to their personal issues. And think about how you would want someone to, respond to you. And that's what's going to end up driving that connection. And for God's sakes, be present on the floor. Right. Jackie, this has been a great interview. It's been a great show. I'm going to start winding down now. But before we hit, stop record, I do got a couple last questions for you. And the first one being a question I ask all the guests here at Moving Forward Leadership. And that is to you, Jackie Freedman. What makes a great leader?
Well, I think what makes a great leader is that combination of starting with that combination of integrity and always thinking about what's best for the organization first. So they're always looking at integrity. They're always looking at what's best for the organization. So they're always uniting people behind something. Never divisive. We're never blaming. We're always uniting.
Awesome. Finishing up where we started off. Love it. And then the final thing is, how can people find you? How can they reach you? How can they be part of your journey? Where can they buy the book, etc.?
So great. Thank you, Scott. There's more information on for me and my business is on energizingbusiness.com. And of course, there's information on the book at updraftthebook.com. And also it's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all the normal online sellers.
Awesome. For the listeners, always, it's easy for you. Just go to movingforwardleadership.com/126. Links are in the show notes for you. Jackie, thank you. Thanks for coming out. It's been a pleasure. We shared some stories. We shared some laughs. And I'm sure, more importantly, that the listeners got something out of this. So thanks again.
Oh, my pleasure, Scott. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right, that's all I got for you fine folks today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the interview. And most importantly, I hope you got something out of it. And if you did, remember R², S², right? Rate and review the show so that it gets a little bit noticed, a bit more. But most importantly, I can help more people, because that's what I'm here for. That's what my guests are here for, is to help more people become better leaders and not being bosses, right? So remember that. R², rate and review. S, share the show. Share this show with someone who you think can relate to the podcast as a whole and today's topic. And then finally, subscribe. Subscribe so that you never miss another episode. And you can do that via your podcast playing app of choice through movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, stop bossing and start leading. Take care now.